Dans la seconde partie de notre balado, on déambule avec Lori Beavis et Jobena Petonoquot à la Maison de la Culture Janine Sutto, anciennement appelée la Maison de la Culture Frontenac.
Oh, wow.
Oh, you like it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I liked it there too. I think it's.
Oh,
It looks
wonderful.
very comforting, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
it looks lovely. Yeah.
Notre enregistrement a eu lieu un peu avant le vernissage de l'exposition collective Initawa, dont Lori Beavis est la commissaire et à laquelle Jobena Petonoquot participe avec 3 autres artistes féminines, soit Anna Klaus, Eruoma Awashish et Kate Anoron du Moulin-Bouche. L'exposition explore leurs identités à travers leurs liens avec le territoire, les récits familiaux et leur mémoire.
We arrived in the Maison de la Culture Janine Sutto. There's a beautiful show and it was curated by Lori. And Jobena, do you want to present yourself?
Yeah, Kwe, Jobena Petonoquot Nindigenous. Hi, my name is Jobena Petonoquot, and I'm Algonquin. I'm from the Kitigan Zibi Reserve in the Outaouais, located in Quebec. I'm currently pursuing my MFA in Fibers and Material Practices at Concordia University. And I'm one of the fortunate artists to be part of the Initawa exhibition curated by Lori Beavis at the Maison de la Culture, Janine Sutto.
So Lori, do you want to introduce yourself too?
Sure. Ani, Lori Beavis, Indigenous cause, Pemadashka Tewang, Shi Nugojuan, Ndojba, Bawishishiki Ndodum. Hello, my name is Lori Beavis. My source communities are Hiawatha First Nation at Rice Lake, Ontario, and at Peterborough, Ontario. And my clan is the Deer, and they are the helpers.
So we're here in Maison de la Culture Janine Sutto. I'm proud of Inatawa. And what were your intention in the curating of this show with 4 different natives artists?
Well, Initawa is a word that in Anishinaabe that means to hear or understand her in a certain way. And when I asked the 4 different women to come into this exhibition, it was really, as I sort of thought through it, after sort of making, because they were friends mostly, and so it was like, let's do this together, but also each of the 4 women come to their cultural identity and also to their art practice in a different way, and so and that also speaks a lot to the way that they make art and to the work that they actually make as well. So I really, this exhibition has actually now, this is its 4th space that it's been in since June of 2022. So it's always been a little bit different each time in terms of the placement and the way that we set the work up in conversation with one another as well. And then Jobena, we put in a new piece because we were a little overwhelmed by how enormous the space is and this time around. But it's always been really interesting to sort of see how it fits into a new space, how it changes the dynamic a little bit also, and just sort of working with in different texts and different directors, and it's just been really, really a rich experience. So.
And around us there is many different artworks. We cannot describe all the artworks, but for sure I would love to have explanation and description of your installation. And Lori, after you could choose one of the an installation, could be a video, or and give us some images for the people who will listen this podcast. We start with your installation.
Sure. So this is my new work. It was made in 2022 in the fall. and it's called Ceremony with the King, but it has two different titles, but it's work that actually goes together. So I have disembodied earth right here, and it's basically my indigenous take on Victorian mourning jewelry. And I don't know I don't know if anyone's familiar with Victorian mourning jewelry, or I think it was either called memento mori jewelry, and it was usually made with hair, but I decided to use beads. And the reason why I decided to use beads is because it talks about the cross-cultural interactions that we had with the colonizer, and also I'm maintaining nature and also revering nature at the same time, because I'm also using a lot of gold. But since I'm speaking about mourning, it also speaks of the restrictions of women, but women in general, because I've used rabbit snare. I don't know if you're familiar with tying rabbit snares. My mom taught me how to tie rabbit snares, and well, these ones are very pretty, but they're rabbit snares, and I use them to hang each work, because I'm talking about the struggles of women, the struggles of being trapped inside colonialism. And also I decided to stitch the necklaces onto rabbit fur to make it kind of suggestive of a rotting animal, like if you've seen it with the tufts of fur and the bone showing through. So it's really about resilience, but it's also about the cyclical patterns of nature. And then right around here, we have Ceremony with the King. And if you're familiar, like where the Queen has passed away since, and now Canada is still controlled by the monarchy. So what did King Charles inherit? And I wanted to establish an invitation to King Charles, and also talk about I made this tea, but it's tea made from earth from my community, and the reason why I wanted to make dirt tea is to kind of talk about the colonizers' extreme thirst for land and power. And also I made this thing, I don't know if you're familiar with the Blue Ribbon Prize, but I made a funerary black ribbon prize, which is a prize that you wouldn't really want, because it has a cell on it that's symbolic of disease and cancer, but also colonial disease as well. So I have that here, and as you can see, the chairs are left vacant because this is a conversation that's never going to happen. But also I establish interconnections of trying to make interconnections with the monarchy and have a conversation with him. And I do that with the ribbon, trying to link the chairs together. So all of this art piece together talks about colonial atrocities and also the cyclical patterns of nature, the idea of mourning and communicating and having a conversation with the monarchy, but then not really having a conversation. So that's what this piece is about. Yeah.
It's so relevant.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Jobena. Lori, do you want to select one of the artworks? There's so many. I know it's very hard to select one of them.
Yes, because they've also all gotten to be like really good friends as well. Let's go and look at the video that's projected on the wall here, though. This is called "Repeat Along the Border," and it's a work by Hannah Claus, and it's in all of the video works in the exhibition. There's no dialogue, and the sound that we have is often quite subtle. And now we're actually hearing the airplane taking off as well. But this is I wanted this to be the iconic piece, the was sort of the identifier of the exhibition, just because it's the way that it speaks very much to sort of sight and sound, and the way that Hannah works also, and putting things into relationship with one another. Also, sort of there's a sort of gentleness and a slowness to the way that she works as well, and so it really comes through in the way that the video is sort of built and developed. You can also, the way that she wants them put onto the wall, as well as that the viewer can like walk into the frame, and you actually are in the work itself also. And I think that's really interesting. And and then it's also with the sound. When it comes, there's the combination of birdsong and children's voices and laughter, and then also the planes that you hear are because she went to Tyendinaga. Hannah's a member of a citizen of Tyendinaga First Nation, which is a Kanakahaka nation in Ontario, just off the 401, so but she's also English heritage as well. So for her, it's bringing those things together as well. It's also part of her way of being in the world. And so I think the fact that Tyendinaga is beside a little English town called Trenton, where there's this Air Force base and things like that, and then the sound of that is all coming together as well. The children on the reserve, as well as the sound of the plane. So there's just this sort of nice sort of melding of things and bringing things. And the fact that we can, as viewers, can walk into the space and be in the work as well. So there's all those sort of layers of relationships that are happening, and that I think for me that's where what Hannah is speaking about so much in the work that she creates.
There is so much kindness in the images. It's very delicate. We're touching poetry. And she's playing a lot with the elements. We see we can feel the wind. We see the sky.
Exactly, and then sort of old beadwork patterns worked out, and often you see that on the sort of leggings and the skirts that Haudenosaunee women wear. So there's and the sort of celestial patterns and that sort of thing too. So it's all built in.
And we have here a fantastic opportunity to bring young people from different communities, and to are you working with a different non-profit organization to bring that young people, and to pass this heritage, and to, in the good way, influence them to say it's possible. You have also the opportunity now, fundings to help you to jump in the in education, in the art field. Do you have that? Do you have these kind of structures?
Not at Daphne. We're still, as I said earlier, we sort of established ourselves right as the pandemic was starting, so that slowed a lot of the things down that we've been doing. Certainly, yes, we're any relationship that we can build with a CEGEP like Hiuna is there. There's also the name of it is slipping by me right now, but I can give it to you later. But there's a group of young Indigenous people that come from the regions of Quebec, and they've come to Daphne every May for the last couple of years, and we've already planned the visit for them for this. So those are sort of like the kids that are being introduced to a week of arts programming at different institutions and different spaces, and so that's really lovely. But I think the thing about this exhibition and the fact that it's actually been traveling from Maison de Culture across the island has been just amazing, because these the city of Montreal, sometimes they don't do a very good job of removing the snow, but they do a great job of like arts and culture, and having these in neighborhoods across this city, across this island, is just phenomenal. And the number of people that have come in to see this exhibition in the different spaces that it's been in has just been amazing. And there are people like who are, it was in Park Extension the last time around, and there's people there that are learning French as a second language. There's school groups, there's youth groups, there's mums and babies, so it's just all kinds of people are coming in and seeing this exhibition and seeing the work and getting to know these artists and what their art practice is and how their sort of cultural identity, comes through in the work that they're creating.
I was wondering, there's about 60 exhibition places, artistic centers in Quebec, and none of them is a First Nation organization. How do you explain this?
Well, it is a difficult thing to understand and to sort of come to grips with why there's never been another Indigenous artist-run center started. I do think a lot of it comes down to the fact that the 4 co-founders of Daphne, Hannah Claus, Nadia Mir, Scawanati, and Caroline Monet, each of them in their own way, through the sort of their art practices and their art activism and their sort of representation as Indigenous artists, have in some way or another have all carried with them the idea of starting an Indigenous artist-run center, and I think that the moment was right in 2017 when they just sort of seemed to organically come together. They had all been friends and known each other in different ways across time. Excuse me. So coming together in 2017 and actually sort of starting to talk about this, the timing was really, really good in terms of it was Canada's 150, and there was the recognition, all this sort of like the celebrations and the planning and all that was going into all of these events that were going to happen across the country, and then suddenly it was like, oh, maybe the Indigenous people of this country are not actually going to feel that this is a celebratory thing, and so then there needed to come to an understanding that there was going to be another way, there was going to be another story that could be told. And of course, through the arts, that was a way for the story to be told. So a lot more funding went into the Canada Council for the Arts through the Creating, Knowing and Sharing program as well. So then the money became available, and it was just, there was more money available, and it was for Indigenous art collectives and artists and artist-run centers as well. So it was just they wrote the first projects grant. They were successful, which brought Daphne into existence, and we've just been building on that over the last 3 years now, I guess, almost 3 years. So there's that, and just it's just we have really strong ideas about what and how we're going to exhibit art, whose work we're going to exhibit. We often show solo exhibitions. It's funny because we're standing in a group show, but we often have, the majority of the exhibitions are solo exhibitions, and there's a really good reason for that as well, as because Indigenous artists and women artists, queer artists are usually still much less likely to get a solo exhibition, and so it's also, a solo exhibition is no matter what stage of an artist's career they're at, it's a really good marker for where they are and where they're going to go, because often people sort of think about what they're going to put into the show. They may have, in our very first exhibition, we had such a great lead time that the artist whose was the first exhibition that we had in the Daphne space, he made a completely new body of work for that exhibition, and it was a really important and really good moment for that artist, Tari Hulan, a Wendat artist from Mendaki, and he made art that he'd been thinking about for a really long time, and it's now it's put him into a new momentum as well in the year and a half since that show. So it's just there's it's just, this is something that people have been waiting for a really long time. People are super excited about us being there. They're really excited and interested in working with us to a degree that can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes as well, because so many people wanted to collaborate and partner with us that we had to sort of just take, and just let us build our, just had to ask people to just let us build our boat and let us figure out what we're actually doing. And then, so this year in 2023 is the first year that we're actually doing collaborations with other organizations. So, and it was also really important that we, build relationships with people from the very, very beginning of a project. And so that is what's taken a year and a half to do with the two organizations that we're working with this year. So,
I have a question for both of you. Historically, we have witnessed a chronic absence of First Nation artists from the visual arts scene in Quebec. Recently, there has been a marked interest on the part of the institutions, curators, exhibition spaces for their practices and their vision of our society. In your opinion, what has triggered this change?
I believe it's the exposure of all the colonial atrocities by the government, because previously natives aren't supposed to have a history. We're supposed to be history. So now all these little things are creeping through the cracks of the walls, and there's all this exposure. So now there's interest in what artists have to say. And also, like, I myself as an artist, I feel very empowered because I can use art to communicate my own stories and also my visual language. I'm not fluent in Algonquin, so I use art to communicate, but art is very universal, so it's a very powerful tool to teach people. So now, I don't know how long this interest will last, but I'm very grateful for it, and I will ride the wave for as long as I can. As long as people are interested, I will make art. Even when people aren't interested, I'm still going to make art. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really interesting as well, because people have always made art. People have always made art. Women, whether they used the art that they were making as a way of sort of economically looking after their families. That's really important, and there's a great history of that. So, often that work has been downgraded as merely as craft or as souvenir items and things like that, but there is an integrity to that work as well. And I just also think in terms of contemporary practice, the work is just so phenomenally interesting. It is so beautiful. It's so diverse. People are doing amazing work, and it's I think that is what is yes, there's a sort of bandwagon, but it's also just simply that the curators can't really ignore. Think about Beat Nation, a little exhibition that began at the Grunt Gallery in 2005 or 7 or something like that, and it just traveled across the country, and it got a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and then it finally landed at the Musée d'Art Contemporain in Montreal. And it was like walking in there and seeing Maria Hupfield and the jingle dress things that she was doing, and Sheena Reese and Skeena Reese and all of the different, but so much work. It's just, it was just phenomenal to see that and to have that culture sort of come forward in that way. And then every 5 years, Sakahan and Akabakoni at the National Gallery has made a huge, huge difference as well. And that's also making people recognize that there are Indigenous nations all across the world and in different countries around the world. And so bringing that work to Ottawa and into the National Gallery it's supposed to be every 5 years, every 5 years. but the work that's being seen in that exhibition is amazing. It's just, it's diverse, it's fun, it's serious, it's heartbreaking. It's got, it's just, there's just so much to see and to learn from the work that Indigenous people are doing in terms of their art practices at this time.
There are relatively few First Nation artists or professionals in Quebec compared to other origins represented in collection, exhibitions, curator, or other decision makers in contemporary art world. What would be the means to widen the pool of creators and art professionals in Quebec and in Canada?
Simply by education, because I'm from a small community in Kitigan-Zibi, and when I talk about artists to my own people, because I know all these artists, because I'm an artist and I study art history too, a lot of the times they have no idea what I'm talking about, because when I was growing up, I never had access to museums. I never went to a gallery. I never even thought about being an artist, even though I'm a very creative person and I've always been a highly imaginative child. So I think establishing workshops would be really great to demonstrate to people, maybe through even social medias too, because it's more easily accessible and people can see what is possible for them. And I feel like for myself as an Indigenous artist, I'm not an ambassador, but I'm also showing my work to show people what's possible. So I think it's just a matter of time, yeah.
But I think that there's people are working as artists in communities all over the province. We're in such an enormous province. There are 11 nations. There's so many different communities across. I think there are people working in those communities. We just maybe aren't hearing about them because we're like Montreal centric. That's just because that's where we are. We know what's happening here, but we don't necessarily know what's happening further away. There's also, you think about the communities that have cultural centers on land, on the territory. That often makes a big difference in terms of people, having a recognition that other people within their community are making work, and that therefore they could be making art as well. The internet has been amazing and an amazing tool for people in communities that are spread out across this province, because it's a way to bring people together, because you can see what somebody is doing in a Cree community far in the north, and what Jobena is doing here in Montreal, or when she was in Kitigan-Zibi. So that is sort of a way in which people are learning and moving forward as well in terms of their understanding about their own practice as artists.
The three levels of a government in Canada have released historic amounts of money to develop the network and opportunities for First Nation professionals. In your experience, is the right way to proceed?
I don't really know what you want to do.
Because they're giving huge amount of money, and do you think it's the right way to do it?
Well, unfortunately, that's probably the only way to do it, because they've people sort of putting sort of the historic way that people were put onto reserved lands, and they were isolated, and people were became very sick. There was disease, there was starvation. The housing has been very poor. There's been the ongoing issue with water and clean water and the access to that. So there's it just does come down to money. I can't really speak to this because my knowledge level is not really fantastic, but I do just think that the one way that they're going to be able to fix things is by putting the infrastructure in, and they have to do that through money, and then they have to make sure that there's schools, they have to make sure that there's good housing. All of that stuff has to come through through the money and sort of financing those things. And that's the reparation that needs to be done. And it happens, but it's still not to a degree that it could be and should be, perhaps. When you think about all the reaping of the natural resources across this country and how the government's profited from that for centuries now.
Each artist who exhibits at Daphne Center receives a fee, but we know that the creators often live below the poverty line. How can we remedy this situation?
Well, yeah, just by... We do, I guess I can only speak from the standpoint of Daphne, is that we do recognize that artists aren't paid enough. They often are not, they don't have a living, wage over the course of a year. Daphne does, we follow the CARFAC fee schedule. We pay above the CARFAC fee schedule for because it raises itself a little bit every year. As one single small organization, we do, if we ever get an opportunity, and we haven't yet, but if we ever get an opportunity to sort of talk to, the arts funders, we can, we certainly would do that and would advocate. I'm on the Indigenous Curatorial Collective's board of directors, and I just wrote a letter to the Ontario Arts Council as the treasurer of the ICCA to say, please don't cut the arts in Ontario. But I haven't had a chance to do that here in Quebec yet. But that's sort of that advocacy work is something that I suppose we could move towards and take on. The thing is about Daphne is we're still a very young organization, and I'm the only full-time employee. We have somebody who does our social media for a few hours a week, and then we've got two wonderful interns who are like the next generation, and I'm like priming them to like take over my job. So it's just, and it's also talking to the Arts Council about making sure that people who are the cultural workers get paid well, because it's a very demanding job to run an Indigenous arts organization, and it's because there are so many demands upon your time and what people want you to do and how they want you to represent, and so yeah, we're advocating and asking the Arts Council to recognize that people need to be well paid for the work that they're doing.
My last question is for you too. What are your aspirations concerning your profession and the evolution of the art world?
Well, my aspirations for me, being an artist is not a job, in the sense that I'm practicing my culture and I'm telling my stories. And before I started school, I did have a job, and I was making art for the Ottawa Art Gallery. I promised them all this new art, and I was working by night, but it's just because I'm so passionate about it. So I think as an artist, you can sustain yourself, and I like to do multiple things. I'm not a one-trick pony. I like having a job, and I like making art. So I think there's a nice balance for me to do both at the same time, and I would love to be an educator, and I still want to make art. So that's why I'm doing the MFA program right now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I just think my aspiration is to just keep encouraging the next generation of artists and cultural workers to just come into the field and stay with it. That's really important. And for me as a curator, the ongoing my reason for doing this work is because I really want people to be able to tell their own stories. I really want people to be able to represent themselves in a way that feels true to who they are and their own understanding of being an Indigenous person and their own indigeneity. And also I just, I think that sort of can come through family stories. It can come through just different ways of sort of having been and experienced the world. And, I just feel really happy to be able to keep helping people tell their stories in the context of exhibitions.
I thank you a lot, Lori, Jobena, for your great generosity and for having enlightened me in these numerous aspects which are unfortunately still too little known. Mm-hmm. So thank you very, very much for the last 2 hours together.
You're welcome.
And I wish to discover every month shows like that, mm-hmm. and see the complexity of all these cultures, mm-hmm. and because it's bring me in another place, and we need to be fed and to understand what was the past and how we could build the future.
Absolutely.
So thank you a lot.
Yeah, and thank you. You're very welcome. It was an honor to be able to speak, and now people are gonna understand more. So I'm glad I could help, and I'm grateful. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Les coulisses de l'art, c'est fini pour aujourd'hui. On se retrouve pour un prochain épisode. Ce podcast n'aurait pas été possible sans la collaboration précieuse de Sandra Saint-Hilaire, Thomas Floquet, Mathis Gagenard, Emma Sanson, Mylène Jérémy et Étienne Legast.
Merci à toi Frédéric de nous avoir guidés à travers les coulisses de l'art.
Et surtout, merci à nos charmantes invitées, Lori Beavis et Jobena Petonoquot.